Well, folks, Vaughan's back. Yep, we're going to talk about prisons again. You know, he went to prison and he's back, and I lost him for a year, but he's back with us. Vaughan, welcome again.
Hey, Max, it's so good to be back with you. And yes, I went to prison, and man, did I learn a lot.
There's some great feedback from the public. Are really quite grateful for what you're doing, because what we see is prisoners come out and they're scary people, and they go back in again. They break the law.
Yeah,
And you're trying to break that cycle.
Look, Max, I've been quite overwhelmed by the positive feedback that's come back, and I'm so happy for the men that are in the prison that, to me, it kind of validates what they are trying to do. And so, if there's anything that's motivation for me, is hearing that positive feedback, because it's assurance that you're kind of on the right track, right?
Okay, so what Vaughan's got is hoki mai.
Hawkeye mai.
Hawkeye mai.
Beautiful, Max. You're nailing it.
He's taught me, folks.
You sound like a fluent Rio speaker.
I'm farther from that. Anyway, getting back to it, 14 different sessions here, and you've given me the brief, which is really interesting. First off, who am I? Day one.
Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
that would be challenging to actually breach that subject.
Yeah, so just for the viewers to understand, those 14 topics or 14 steps over the 14 weeks, each week has 3 sessions. So we go really hard, 1, 2, 3 sessions, have a break, come back, because we really want them to have time to absorb what we talk about. So the granddaddy at the whole top of the tree of the topics is the who am I, and I think that to give that some context, when gang members arrive on our doorstep and they've said, look, I really do want to walk away from the gang and I'd like to be part of your Hawkeye Mai program, these men have probably lived many years in prison. A lot of them have been in there a long time, some since the 90s, where every day they were coming out of their cell. Cells get unlocked at 8:30 and locked up again at 4. Mask on. I've got to survive my way through the day until I get locked up again tonight. Mask off at night. So that becomes your character, your gang character, whatever your gang nickname you might have, Paulie Walnuts or whatever. No, but you know what I mean. You're actually, the who am I couldn't be more further.
Oh,
than
look,
the
even I do it. Look, when I had a job, I would go into the workplace with a certain demeanour, and when I'm in front of the father-in-law, there was a certain demeanour, and you mask, and you put up not the real you, but you put up the best you, and then you get home and go, it's over.
Yeah, totally. So the best of all chameleons is the human, and I think that gang member that's got absolute loyalty to the patch and ended up in a gang lifestyle, whether born into it or gravitated to it, by the time that they've arrived on our doorstep and they're wanting to be a part of Hawkeye Mai, that mask has been going off and on for years and years. So we're really, the who am I is the dropping of the mask, the looking in the mirror, seeing what you see, owning that, and it'll be ugly. It'll be bloody ugly. And therefore getting to a point of, do I understand what a good man is that protects and provides? Do I want to be that? Do I want to go back to my whānau? And do I want to restate or reinstate the mana that I've lost?
Geez, Vaughan, it must be hard, because I can imagine one thing in a prison, you'd want to be staunch. You don't want anyone to come and beat you or think you're a wimp. You would be walking out there with a bit of a swagger and just don't mess with me look. But you're asking them to drop that?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things is that, in the prison environment, we put, and this is why I think that the corrections facilities, it's almost a thankless task in the sense that so much work, so much good work goes into these men, and one day we hope that they go home, back into society. It's like dropping off a cliff when you walk out of a prison and you go back into the real world. There's no ticker tape parade for an ex-gang member coming out into society. So
the hierarchy of a prison, wouldn't it be that, look, I've done the worst crime, so I'm more important than you, or I'm more heavy than you, so I'm more important. So does that must make it even harder for peer pressure on you to drop that mask?
I think that's right. To maintain a reputation of being that revered character in the gang community that one believes you to be, the dropping of the mask is absolutely going to cost you. And in fact, as far as they are concerned, there is no mask. This is what you see is what you get. But, obviously we know that if a good man is inside every man somewhere, then it is a mask.
How do you go about it?
How do you go about dropping that
One
mask?
thing you've taught me years ago, you said in the Maori way, Max, because you introduced me to some of your Maori friends, and you said you tell them where you're from and your background, because that's the Maori way.
Yeah.
And is this part of? I know it's not a cultural thing, but is that the start of the program? Is to say where you came from and what you did.
Yeah. So in terms of I think just absolute politeness and decency in Māoridom, but in any world really, the ability to introduce yourself properly, so that hey, I know where you're from and I know who you might be connected to. So there's an absolute validation of who you are. That is a real critical part of it. But many gang members that turn up, they may not even have a clue. That might be a world that they've not been connected to for some time. So some will be fortunate, and there are men in there that have a beautiful knowledge of their whakapapa, and they know where they come from in that regard, even though their gang life has taken them down another track.
But there must be many who were adopted out, went from home to home, so they don't have a whānau as such. They don't have a family. What they call their family is the mates, or somebody might have taken that journey with them, or perhaps a staunch brother who come and picked him up and said, come with us, bro, I can show you the way, the truth and the light, and you join the gang.
Yeah, and that's like, I love the way that you touched on that there were many who were adopted out. They weren't adopted out, they were just uplifted from their homes. So, back in the 70s, the 60s, 80s, 90s, kids play up and they end up being removed from the family, and they end up in an environment that's not safe. And there's a sordidity that's been exposed with what went on with that, which means that the gang community was probably like heaven compared to where they were.
Oh, for sure.
So they ran away to that, or they gravitated towards that. So we're dealing with decades of a societal problem that we're not trying to solve. We can't. In the prison, what we're looking at is the individual. And so coming back to this, who am I? We all know that when we emerge from the birth canal, for want of better words, we're pure. We are an innocent soul, and we've arrived on this planet. We come into an environment that over time we are influenced by what's around us. So clearly people that end up in a gang, that environment that they were born into probably had a fair bit of where they ended up, just like where you and I have ended up. Understanding that, and understanding how did I get where I am, is a real fundamental part of it. So I think that coming back to the who am I, the warts and all, the good, the bad and the ugly, being able to totally take ownership of probably horrendous things that have happened. We don't need to name them in the video, but you don't have to think too hard to understand that the lifestyle in a gang is going to expose you to some really ugly stuff. That is something that you've done, and understanding why that happened. So therefore, if I'm truly to leave that behind me and become a better man going forward, I know what I don't want to be. I absolutely know. And I think that what this 14 weeks program has taught me, we're in week 8 at the moment, they will revert in and out of that. They will have days where actually they are right back in that community.
It must take a lot, because with a gang you get protection, you get brotherhood, you get friendship, you get a family you belong to. So some people become Christians, some people belong to a gang. There's all sorts of affiliations. And when a person joins a corporate, you're adopting the gang culture, and which is the corporate culture. So to break that and saying, give all that up, and I can give you, well, nothing. But let me find out what makes you tick. It must be hard, John.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things, that you just have to be honest and say, hoki mai is not a panacea or a solution to men wanting to walk away from a gang. It's a 14-week program that you run through that does nothing more than plant a seed, that it's up to you to keep watering that seed and grow it into the man that you want to be. That's all
you've
we
told
can
me
do.
There's a gang member actually put this together, a leader, in fact, I believe.
Yes.
Did he lead the way to talk about his own circumstances? Did he take a leadership role in this first day of the program?
I would say that one of the biggest learning curves for me was exactly that, in that the content that I've been exposed to and had the privilege to be shared, because it's an environment of trust and safety, he has been very open about his lifestyle in the gangs. And a lot of it, you couldn't make it up. right? It is an incredible story. And so when you have a leader of a gang saying, this is where I've been, this is what I've done, and I'm not trying to glorify or romanticize that, I'm ashamed of it. However, I'm owning it. You find that others, well, actually, I'll tell you my story.
Does he say that? I'm ashamed of what my background is.
He absolutely has owned what he did. And I think that whilst I can say these words of, he absolutely says that, whether he has or not, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
But he's told his peers that.
But
in
he's
front of
shared that
you?
amongst them, that he knows that he is not proud of what he's done. And proud's like actually minimising it. It's worse than that. That owning it is actually going, well, what am I going to do about it? And so I think all he can do is look forward and go, I don't want others to go down the same track that I went down.
The young ones do the same, because you and I have been brought up of a generation that we respected our leadership. We respected our elders. We respected our adults. These people obviously in jail probably don't, but they still have learned in a gang they have to appreciate the leadership. Do you think he's the reason why some of them are following?
Look, I think that when you bring, say in our world, you have to have some credibility, and I think in the gang community there are many that are not what they make themselves out to be. They will give the impression that they are a hardened gang member, but they're really somebody that's enjoying the romance of looking like one. Here is a man that, and actually, here is not a man, here are 14 men, because all of these men have exactly the same story, that they are proven to have lived a life of a gang lifestyle. So coming back to this particular prisoner who is leading Hawke's Mai, there is no question. In the gang world, inside of the prison, everybody knows who he is, and no one questions where he has come from in terms of his credentials, for want of a better word. Mm-hmm. So that definitely matters. It's a little bit like someone writes a book, right? And it's a tell-all book. Some people use a ghostwriter to put it into words that sound alluring. His story is raw, and they're his words, and that's why in this program, this is not glossed over to look good, to be sold or hustled, and actually, yeah.
At the end of that day one, Vaughan, did everybody come clean? And actually, do you think you've got everyone across to actually tell you who they are and who am I? And do you think you had full success, or do you think it's something you've got to touch on?
No, you've got to keep at it. It's like going to the gym, you're not going to see the results until a little while. So because obviously as someone sitting in there as the facilitating staff member, I look around the room and go, are you the real deal? How far? And so they're all on a different level of the journey with their different stories. I think it was probably about week 3 or 4 when I started thinking, I think we're onto something here. So most turn up with like, hey, cool, we're in a group, sort of thing. And so, gang members don't talk like that. But, they were really happy to be involved in something because it was a purpose. But you definitely could see that some took longer to come out of their shell than others. So it was really hard to glean.
I imagine, Vaughan, that some of them wouldn't be very articulate, whereas others, obviously the guy who wrote this, can express himself very well and comfortably and confidently. But some of them will be sitting back, what are my peers doing here? Or should I do that? Or,
yes, that's a good point, because I think someone who's capable of being a president of a gang chapter could be a CEO.
So what about these others that are apprehensive?
So those that maybe were in a lower ranking role, that you did right, that the ability to communicate effectively, there's some coaching needed there. But you've got to be very careful that what you're encouraging them to talk about is not manipulated by your therapeutic type of, approach. You've got to keep that out of it and go, I want to hear you express yourself like you. But yeah.
Have you had training on this? Because I know a bit about your background, and you haven't been a psychologist or psychiatrist or something, but you've been taught, obviously you went for a year of training, haven't you?
In terms of expertise around psychology, I am not a psychologist. So let's put those cards on the table. But nor is this a psychological journey. So I think that the training that I've got is that I have an ability to think in a structured way, to get the message across, and without blowing my own trumpet, and I've mentioned this before, I've gained an affinity with the community that's there. So, and I'm not going to call it trust, because you're in a prison, you can never use that word, right? Well, I don't believe that you can. What it is we have a relationship, and it's got a purpose of your walk away from the gangs. But, you used the word hustle a little while ago, Max, and I just want to touch on that. There is no hustle in Hawke's Mai. And what you will find a lot in government, actually, is people have these programs that they've been created. They take them to government. The government, writes a check for a few million for them to be delivered, right? This is already paid for, because it's costing people like you and I $160,000 a head for these men to be in prison. So one of the objectives and the outcomes of Hawke's Mai is to turn around to the taxpayer and say, as our major stakeholder, this is what we're doing with your 160,000. We're using our time constructively, and we're trying to get gang members back into the community with $160,000 for just 1 year, by the way. If they've been in there 10 years, we'll do the math. This is what you get for your money. So I think that's a key point about the who am I. There's a payback.
Well, there's a final question for you. Who am I? Now, Vaughan, I'm going to put it to you. The Vaughan I used to know was political. He would be you and I. Every day we'd jump on the show and we had some very strong views.
Yeah.
And sometimes we disagreed, God forbid. But, there was no argument. You had some strong political views. What's happened to those views?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Max. And I think that thanks to my experience in the prison system, my political views have changed completely. And to sum them up, I have none. I think that I will vote. I will vote at the next election, as I have at every election. That's my responsibility. But the purpose of what I'm doing now has made me realise that the government of the day we accept, and we work with the government of the day, regardless of who that is. So therefore, what this government is trying to deliver, we've got to look at that and go, how do we make that work? And I believe Hawke's Mai synergizes into that. And so coming back to Vaughan and your question, yep, in 12 short months, I've moved from somebody that's had a view about politics that I'm neutral. I'm 100% neutral, and that's sincere, Max. Anybody can test me on that. How say you?
Well, Vaughan, I'm going to get to you next week, and we're going to talk a bit more about this program, because there's a lot more. 14 different points. We've only touched on the first one. But there's a point you've made. Obviously, you have to go back to it all the time. Who am I? Who am I? And the point you make about is being a better man.
Yeah.
So that's where you dig into the roots of a person and finding out who they are.
In search of the good man, totally.
Good man. See you next week.
Hey, Max, enjoyed it. Thanks, bro.